Zachary Miller wiped sweat from his forehead as he walked through the crowded paths of Centauri Station's galactic bazaar. The air was thick with strange smells, spicy foods from distant worlds, exotic perfumes, and the less pleasant odors of too many species packed into one space. Loud voices called out in dozens of languages, advertising everything from rare gems to questionable medicines. As Earth's assistant trade diplomat, Zachary wasn't supposed to be in this section of the station. The official Earth policy strictly opposed the buying and selling of sentient beings. But curiosity had pulled him away from the respectable trading floors and into the shadier markets that operated in a legal gray area. "Just looking," he mumbled, to himself, just seeing what we're up against. At 35, Zachary had spent 7 years in space working his way up through diplomatic ranks. He had sandy brown hair that never stayed in place and kind eyes that had seen both the best and worst of what the galaxy offered. Today, those eyes narrowed as he passed a series of small platforms where various aliens stood with electronic collars around their necks or wrists. The slave market. He should turn around, report it, leave. Instead, he slowed his steps as he noticed a crowd gathering ahead, their voices raised in what sounded like mockery. "Next item," bellowed a large, purple-skinned Traxian auctioneer, his forearms gesturing wildly. "A female luminari, young, healthy body, but—" He paused dramatically. "Defective merchandise." The crowd laughed. Zachary pushed forward until he could see the platform clearly. There stood a slender humanoid figure. Her skin was pale blue, with faint patterns that might have been beautiful markings. She had no hair, but instead, her head featured delicate fin-like structures that trembled slightly. Her large eyes were downcast, arms wrapped protectively around herself. She wore only a simple shift that barely covered her body. "A luminari who cannot shine," the auctioneer continued, grabbing one of her arms and raising it. Her previous owner discovered the defect after purchase. For those not familiar with luminari, they're valued for their bioluminescence. They light up. Communication, entertainment, even practical lighting. That's what makes them worth the credits. He poked her shoulder roughly. "Show them, broken. Fun." The blue woman closed her eyes, concentrating. Nothing happened. "See? Useless." The auctioneer laughed. "But still, she can clean, cook, whatever basic tasks you need. Starting bid is 50 credits, a bargain for even a defective specimen." Most of the crowd was already walking away, interest lost. Zachary stood frozen, watching as the alien woman's shoulders slumped further, accepting her worthlessness as fact. "Going once," the auctioneer called half-heartedly. Zachary had seen enough slavery in his diplomatic travels to be disgusted, but rarely shocked anymore. Yet something about this scene, the casual cruelty, the absolute dismissal of a person's worth, based on a single trait, lit a fire in his chest. 50 credits, he called out before he could stop himself. The auctioneer's 4 eyes blinked in surprise. "The human bids 50. Going twice." The luminari's head jerked up, her large, silvery eyes finding Zachary's in the crowd. There was no hope there, only confusion. "Sold. To the Earth diplomat." The auctioneer seemed amused. "Didn't know your kind still participated in these transactions?" "We don't," Zachary said coldly as he approached the platform. He transferred the credits from his personal account, not his diplomatic one, and was handed a small electronic key that controlled the woman's collar. Only as the luminari stepped down from the platform, her movements stiff with fear, did Zachary fully realize what he'd done. He, a representative of Earth, had just purchased a person. The walk back to his quarters was uncomfortable. The luminari followed 3 steps behind him, head down, never speaking. Twice he stopped to wait for her, to walk beside him, but she quickly stepped back to maintain the distance. "My name is Zachary Miller," he said finally as they entered the quieter diplomatic section of the station. "What's your name?" For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Ilara, Master." "Not Master," Zachary corrected quickly. "Just Zachary." She didn't respond, but her fins, he realized they might be some kind of sensory organ, flattened against her skull. When they reached his quarters, he keyed open the door and motioned for her to enter. The space was modest by Earth standards, but luxurious compared to most station accommodations. A small living area, kitchen unit, bedroom and bathroom, all kept neat and minimally decorated. Alara stood just inside the door, her body rigid, waiting. "Are you hungry?" Zachary asked, suddenly aware he had no idea what Luminari ate. "Thirsty?" She blinked at him. "I will consume whatever you provide, Mass. Zachary." He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Look, we need to clear something. Up right away." He pulled out a chair at his small table. "Please sit down." After a hesitation, she perched on the edge of the chair, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. "I don't know what came over me back there," he began. "What I did. Buying. It goes against everything I believe in, everything Earth stands for." He took a deep breath. "But I couldn't just walk away." Her silver eyes studied him, uncomprehending. "Earth doesn't recognize slavery," he continued. "Any Earth territory, including these quarters, considers all sentient beings free. So as far as I'm concerned, you're not my slave, property, or servant." He reached for the electronic key in his pocket and placed it on the table between them. "This controls your collar. I'm giving it to you. You can leave anytime you want." Ilara stared at the key but made no move to take it. "You purchased me to free me?" Her voice was soft, with an accent that made her words musical despite their flatness. "Yes. No." Zachary shook his head. "I honestly don't know what my plan was. It wasn't very well thought out." For the first time, something other than fear crossed her face. Confusion. "Where would I go?" she asked. "No luminary will accept a dark one. I cannot light the path or speak the glow language. I am..." She searched for the word. "Broken." "You're not broken," Zachary said firmly. "Different, maybe, but not broken." She looked away. "You know nothing of luminari." "Then teach me," he suggested. "Stay here, not as a slave, but as a guest. I have a spare room. You can have proper clothes, food, safety. In return, maybe you can help me understand your people better. It would be valuable for my diplomatic work." "You wish me to be your cultural guide?" The idea seemed to surprise her. "But I am outcast." "Maybe that gives you a perspective others don't have," Zachary said. "Look, I'm making this up as I go. All I know is I couldn't leave you there, and now we both need to figure out what happens next." For a long moment, Ilara was silent, her fins slowly rising from their flattened position. Finally, she picked up the key from the table. "I will stay," she said quietly. "Not because you own me, but because I have nowhere else to go." She looked directly at him, a small spark of something, pride perhaps, in her silver eyes. "And I am not broken. I am dark." Zachary nodded, relieved. "Good. That's settled then." He stood up. "Let me show you the guest room and we can find you some better clothes." As he showed her around his modest quarters, explaining how the shower worked and where to find food, Zachary couldn't shake the feeling that his impulsive action at the bazaar had just changed both their lives forever. What he didn't know yet was just how right that feeling would prove to be. The first week was awkward. Zachary would wake to find Ilara already cleaning his quarters, despite his repeated insistence that she didn't need to do this. Old habits, he supposed, were hard to break. "Did you sleep well?" he asked one morning, finding her organizing his kitchen supplies. Ilara's fins twitched slightly. He was beginning to recognize this as a sign of uncertainty. "The bed is too soft," she admitted. "I slept on the floor." "We can get you a firmer mattress," Zachary offered. She looked startled by his concern. "That is not necessary." "It is if you're going to live here," he said firmly. "You're not a slave anymore, Ilara. Your comfort matters." Later that day, he brought home new bedding options and clothes more suited to her slender frame. The standard-issue station jumpsuits he'd initially given her hung loosely on her body. The new outfits, while still simple, at least fit properly. When, Ilara emerged from her room wearing a deep blue tunic with matching pants. Zachary smiled. Much better. Thank you, she said, her voice still quiet but a little stronger than before. The color reminds me of twilight on my homeworld. It was the first personal information she had volunteered. Zachary wanted to ask more but feared pushing too hard. Instead, he nodded and prepared their evening meal. By the second week, Zachary realized he needed help. His diplomatic duties kept him busy, and he worried about leaving Ilara alone all day. More importantly, he had questions about her condition that he couldn't answer. I'd like you to meet someone, he told her over breakfast. A friend of mine, Olivia Bennett. She's a xenobiologist at the Earth Embassy. Ilara stopped eating. You wish her to examine me? Only if you're comfortable with it, Zachary assured her. But she might understand more about why you can't produce light. There is nothing to understand. I am dark, Ilara said, using the term she preferred over defective. It happens sometimes among my people, a failure of development. Still, would you mind meeting her? Ilara hesitated, then gave a small nod. As you wish. Not as I wish, Zachary corrected gently. Only if you want to. After a moment, Ilara's fins rose slightly. I am curious, she admitted. No one has ever cared why I am dark before. Doctor. Olivia Bennett was a tall woman with dark skin and curious eyes that lit up when Zachary introduced Ilara. Unlike many humans who dealt with aliens, she showed no discomfort or forced politeness, just genuine interest. It's wonderful to meet you, she said, extending a hand, then quickly withdrawing it when she noticed Ilara's confusion. Sorry, human greeting custom. Not everyone does handshakes. The luminari press palms together, Ilara explained, demonstrating with her own blue hands. Like this? Olivia mirrored the gesture. A tiny smile curved Ilara's lips, the first Zachary had seen. Yes. Olivia's lab was clean and bright, with various scientific equipment Zachary couldn't name. She explained each step before she did anything, asking permission before taking readings with her devices. I've studied luminary biology a little, Olivia told them, but I've never had the opportunity to meet one of your people before. Your bioluminescence is fascinating. It's chemical in nature, right? Yes, Ilara confirmed. Special cells under our skin produce light. Most luminari begin to shine in childhood. I did not. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. May I scan you? It's completely painless. When Ilara agreed, Olivia passed a handheld device over her body, watching the readings on a screen. Her eyebrows rose suddenly. That's interesting, she murmured. What is it? Zachary asked, leaning forward. Well, according to these readings, Olivia adjusted the device and scanned again. Ilara, you do have fully formed light-producing cells. They aren't missing or damaged. Ilara's fins spread wide in surprise. That cannot be right. I do not shine. Not visibly, perhaps. Olivia tapped at her screen, then turned to a larger machine in the corner. Would you mind standing over there in front of that sensor array? I want to check something. Ilara did, as asked, standing still as Olivia adjusted the machine. The scientist made a small sound of discovery. Just as I thought. Look at this. She turned a screen so they could both see it. The display showed an outline of Ilara's body, surrounded by a faint shifting aura of patterns. What is that? Zachary asked. Ilara is producing light, Olivia explained, her voice excited, but it's at a frequency just outside the visual range of luminari and humans. If I shift the detection parameters, she adjusted something, and the patterns became clearer, beautiful swirls of what would have been color if they could see it. I am shining? Ilara's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, quite brilliantly, in fact, Olivia confirmed. You've probably been producing light your whole life, you just can't see it, and neither can other luminari. Ilara stared at the screen, watching the patterns shift as she moved. She raised a hand, and the patterns followed, flowing around, her fingers like water. Can you see what happens when you try to communicate? Zachary suggested. Ilara hesitated, then closed her eyes in concentration, On the screen, the patterns became more complex, intricate whirls and shapes forming and reforming. Amazing, Olivia breathed. The patterns are incredibly structured. What were you saying? My name, Ilara said, her voice thick with emotion. I was saying my name in light speech. Back in Zachary's quarters that evening, Ilara was quieter than usual. She sat on the small couch, staring out at the stars visible through the station's viewport. Are you all right? Zachary asked, joining her with 2 cups of tea. I don't know, she admitted. All my life I believed I was dark, empty. Now I learn. I've been speaking all along, just in a voice no one could hear. She accepted the tea, her hands trembling slightly. It changes nothing, yet it changes everything. How does it change nothing? Zachary asked. I am still outcast, still useless to my people if they cannot see my light. And how does it change everything? Her fins moved gently, a gesture he was beginning to recognize as thoughtfulness. I'm not broken, she said simply. I am merely speaking a different language. Zachary smiled. That I understand. As a diplomat, I've learned that communication takes many forms. Sometimes we just need the right translator. Ilara looked at him with new intensity. Do you think such a thing would be possible? A device to translate my light to frequencies others could see? I don't know, Zachary admitted. But Olivia might. She seemed pretty excited about her discovery. She was kind, Ilara said, not afraid to touch me like most humans are with aliens. Olivia sees beyond surface differences, Zachary agreed. She's always been that way. They fell into comfortable silence, watching the stars. After a while, Ilara spoke again. Before, I was sold the first time I was studying to become a stellar cartographer. Zachary turned to her in surprise. You were a student? She nodded. Maps of stars, planets, navigation routes. That was to be my work. A sad smile crossed her face. Ironic that I, who could not produce light, wished to spend my life charting the greatest lights in the universe. Maybe not ironic, Zachary suggested. Maybe fitting. Ilara considered this. Perhaps. She looked down at her hands. My family hid my darkness for many years. They were ashamed. When I was discovered, they did not defend me. Zachary felt a surge of anger on her behalf. They should have protected you. Such is not our way. The community comes before the individual. A dark one brings shame to all. Well, you're not dark, Zachary reminded her. You shine. They just couldn't see it. For the first time since he'd met her, Ilara laughed, a soft, musical sound. Yes, I shine in darkness. She turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. Thank you, Zachary Miller. Not for buying me, but for seeing me. Zachary felt an unexpected warmth in his chest. We're just getting started, he promised. Tomorrow we'll talk to Olivia about that translator idea. As they continued to watch the stars together, both human and alien felt the first stirrings of something neither had expected to find in this vast, often cruel galaxy: hope. Over the next month, Ilara spent most of her days in Olivia's lab. The xenobiologist had become fascinated with the project of creating a device that could translate Ilara's unique light frequency into visible spectrum. Hold still, Olivia said, adjusting a small metal disc attached to Ilara's shoulder. This new prototype is more sensitive than the last one. Ilara remained motionless, her silver eyes watching Zachary, who sat nearby reviewing diplomatic messages on his tablet. He had taken to spending his lunch breaks in the lab, bringing food for all 3 of them. Okay, try now, Olivia instructed. Ilara closed her eyes in concentration. For a moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly, the air around her shimmered with soft blue and purple light patterns flowing like water around her body. It works, Zachary exclaimed, looking up from his tablet. Ilara opened her eyes and gasped as she saw her own light for the first time with her natural vision. The patterns followed her movements, shifting and changing as she raised her hand in wonder. The translator is converting your natural frequency into one we can all see, Olivia explained, her face glowing with success. What do you think? Tears formed in Alara's silver eyes. It's beautiful, she whispered. She moved her fingers in a specific pattern, and the lights swirled in response, forming complex shapes. What did you say? Zachary asked, fascinated. Thank you, Alara translated. In light speech. Olivia made a few more adjustments to the disc. The device is still a prototype. It needs work to make it smaller and more durable. But the principle is sound. This could change everything for Alara, Zachary said. And potentially for others like me, Alara added quietly. I cannot be the only one. As the translator device improved, Alara began to change. She stood taller, spoke more confidently, and her fins, which Zachary now understood were important sensory and expressive organs, moved more freely. The latest version of the translator was a small, elegant disc that attached to her clothing near her shoulder. With it, she could control when to display her light patterns, making them visible to both humans and, theoretically, to other Luminari. One evening, as Zachary returned from a long day of diplomatic meetings, he found Alara in their shared living area, studying star charts on a borrowed datapad. What are you working on? He asked, collapsing into a chair with a tired sigh. Stellar cartography, she answered. Olivia helped me access educational materials. I am refreshing my knowledge. Zachary smiled. Returning to your studies? That's wonderful. It is. Good to use my mind this way again. She set down the datapad and studied him. You look tired. Difficult negotiations with the Craxian delegation, he explained. They're demanding higher quotas for mineral exports, but Earth regulations limit what we can authorize. Alara's fins tilted forward in what he now recognized as thoughtful interest. The Craxians value personal connection in business dealings. Their leaders must see your soul before they trust trade agreements. Zachary looked at her with surprise. How do you know that? My first owner was a collector of rare items. He entertained many species at his estate. The servants were expected to know the proper protocols for each visitor. Her voice was matter-of-fact, with no bitterness about this part of her past. An idea formed in Zachary's mind. Would you be willing to share what you know about Craxian customs? It could really help my negotiations. Of course, she replied. But I could show you the proper greeting ritual as well. It involves specific movements that signal respect. For the next hour, Alara taught Zachary the complicated Craxian greeting ritual. Her translator disc lit up as she used light patterns to emphasize certain movements. In Luminari culture, we would add light patterns here and here, she explained, demonstrating. It adds meaning that words alone cannot convey. The next day, Zachary invited Alara to join him at the diplomatic meeting. His supervisor, Director B. Caroline Hayes, raised her eyebrows when he made the request, but agreed after he explained Alara's knowledge of Craxian customs. Just an observational role, Director Hayes cautioned. She has no official status. Understood, Zachary agreed. When they entered the meeting room, the three Craxian representatives, large ridge-backed aliens with 4 eyes set in diamond patterns, stared at Alara with obvious curiosity. Who is this? Asked the lead negotiator, Barks. This is Alara, my cultural advisor, Zachary introduced her. Then, to everyone's surprise, he performed the complex greeting ritual Alara had taught him. The Craxians rumbled with approval. Few humans bother to learn our ways, Barks commented. You honor us. Throughout the meeting, Zachary consulted quietly with Alara. Following her subtle suggestions, he emphasized points that resonated with Craxian values and avoided approaches that might cause offense. When the discussion reached a difficult point, about export quotas, Alara whispered a suggestion in his ear. Perhaps, Zachary offered, we could establish a trial period with limited increase in quotas, with regular reviews to assess environmental impact. This would show our trust in your mining methods while upholding our responsibility to planetary conservation. Barks's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of thoughtful consideration among Craxians. This has merit. By the end of the meeting, they had reached an agreement that satisfied both sides, something that hadn't seemed possible the day before. As they left the conference room, Director Hayes pulled Zachary aside. "Impressive work," she said. "Your advisor made quite the difference. Where did you find her?" Zachary hesitated. "It's a long story. Well, I'd like her assistance on the Vexian trade negotiations next week," Hayes said. "Their ambassador arrives in 3 days." Back in their quarters, Alara was quiet as she prepared their evening meal, a habit she maintained despite Zachary's insistence that she didn't need to cook for him. "You were amazing today," Zachary said. "Director Hayes wants your help with more negotiations." "I enjoyed it," Alara admitted. "Using knowledge to create understanding between different peoples, it feels meaningful." "It is meaningful," Zachary agreed. "You have a gift for diplomacy." Alara's fins rose with pleasure, and her translator disc activated, sending gentle patterns of light across her shoulders. "Among my people, diplomats are highly respected. They help maintain harmony between the different light clans." "Would you like to do more of this work?" Zachary asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "But..." Her fins dipped slightly. "I have no official status. I am not a citizen of Earth or any recognized world. Legally, I still exist as property." Zachary set down his fork. "Then we need to change that. I'll speak with Director Hayes about refugee status. It's been granted in similar cases. Would Earth accept someone like me?" "Earth has a long history of offering sanctuary to those seeking freedom," Zachary said. "And with your knowledge and skills, you'd be an asset to the diplomatic corps." Alara's translator lit up with swirls of color that Zachary had come to recognize as happiness. "I never imagined such a future," she said softly. "From darkness to light, from slave to diplomat." "You always had light," Zachary reminded her, "and you always had value. We just needed the right tools to see it." Later that evening, as they prepared for the Vexian negotiations, a message arrived on Zachary's official communication channel. The sender was the Luminari Trade Embassy. "There's a Luminari delegation coming to the station next week," Zachary read aloud, his voice concerned. Alara froze, her fins flattening against her head, in the way they did when she felt threatened. "You don't have to see them," Zachary assured her quickly. Alara was silent for a long moment. Then her fins slowly rose, and her translator disc activated, displaying steady, determined patterns. "No," she said firmly. "I want to meet them. With my translator. With my light." She looked at Zachary with newfound strength in her silver eyes. "It's time they saw me as I truly am." The day the Luminari delegation arrived at Centauri Station, Alara spent extra time preparing herself. She wore her finest outfit, a deep blue diplomatic suit Zachary had helped her select, and carefully attached her translator disc to her shoulder. "Are you sure about this?" Zachary asked as they walked toward the main conference room. Director Hayes had arranged a small reception for the visiting delegation, and both Zachary and Alara had been invited. "No," Alara admitted, her fins trembling. "Slightly. But I must do it anyway." When they entered the reception hall, conversations quieted briefly as people noticed them. The Luminari delegation stood near the center of the room, 5 tall, blue-skinned figures whose bodies pulsed with gentle light patterns. Their fins were larger and more elaborate than Alara's, decorated with small gemstones that caught and reflected their bioluminescence. Director Hayes approached them. "Ambassador Miller, good timing. I'd like to introduce you to the Luminari trade representatives." Zachary blinked in surprise at his new title but recovered quickly. "Ambassador" was an exaggeration of his position, but it wasn't unusual for station officials to inflate titles during formal introductions. "This is my cultural advisor, Alara," he added, placing a supportive hand near her elbow. The lead Luminari, a male with elaborate silver markings on his blue skin, looked at Alara with obvious shock. His fins spread wide, and his light patterns flickered rapidly, the equivalent of an alarmed gasp. "A dark one?" he said in accented Standard Galactic. "Serving as advisor to Earth diplomats?" The other luminari shifted uncomfortably, their light patterns showing patterns that Zachary recognized as embarrassment and distaste. "I am Ilara, formerly of House Nilari," Ilara said, her voice steady despite her trembling fins. "And I am not dark." With deliberate calmness, she activated her translator disc. Immediately, beautiful patterns of blue, purple, and silver light danced around her body, more complex and intricate than the simple communication patterns the Luminari delegates displayed. The leader stepped back, his four eyes widening. "What trickery is this? Dark ones cannot shine." "Not trickery," Ilara replied. "Science. My light has always existed, but at a frequency invisible to Luminari eyes." She formed a complicated pattern with her hands, and her light responded, creating an elegant display that flowed around her. "This human technology translates my natural light to visible frequencies," the delegates murmured among themselves, their own light patterns flickering rapidly in what Zachary recognized as their native communication. "May I introduce Chief Science Officer Olivia Bennett," Director Hayes said, waving Olivia forward. "She developed the technology Ilara is demonstrating." Olivia smiled warmly. "The translator simply shifts Ilara's natural bioluminescent frequency into the visible spectrum. Our research suggests approximately 2% of Luminari may have this variation." She handed a datapad to the lead delegate. "Here are our findings." As the delegate read, his expression changed from disbelief to astonishment. The other Luminari crowded around, their light patterns showing intense curiosity. "If this is true," the leader said slowly, "there are implications for our entire society." "There are others like me," Ilara said, her translator displaying patterns of deep emotion. "Sold as defective, outcast, alone." She stepped forward boldly. "They deserve to be seen." The reception continued for hours as humans and Luminari discussed the implications of Olivia's discovery. Ilara found herself at the center of attention, demonstrating her translator and explaining how it worked. By the end of the evening, the lead delegate, whose name was Varen, had requested a formal meeting with Earth officials to discuss the technology. As they finally returned to their quarters late that night, Ilara was exhausted, but glowing, both literally, through her translator, and figuratively in her demeanor. "You were magnificent," Zachary told her with pride. "It was difficult," she admitted, facing them as an equal rather than a slave or outcast. "But when Varen asked to meet tomorrow to discuss bringing this technology to my homeworld," "It's just the beginning," Zachary said. "Change takes time, but you've started something important." Ilara's fins rose in determination. "I want to help others like me." Over the next 6 months, Ilara's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The Luminari government, facing pressure from both Earth diplomats and their own citizens, began reforms to address the treatment of Dark Ones. Olivia's research proved that these individuals weren't defective, they simply communicated on different frequencies. Translator technology was made available to all Luminari who needed it. As more Dark Ones gained the ability to be seen and heard, they shared their stories. Many had been sold into servitude or abandoned. Some had been hidden away by ashamed families. Ilara, now officially granted refugee status and working as a cultural liaison for the Earth Embassy, started a foundation to locate and help these individuals. Her knowledge of the slave markets and trading routes proved invaluable in finding others like herself. Another 10 were freed from the markets on Rigel Station, she told Zachary one evening, as they shared dinner in what was now their shared home. Her status as a free person had changed their relationship from reluctant master and slave to equal partners in life and work. "That makes 73 this year," Zachary said. "Your foundation is making a real difference." Ilara's light patterns showed pride and satisfaction. "The Luminari government has agreed to outlaw the practice of selling those born with different light frequencies. It will take time for attitudes to change completely, but it's progress." "Have you heard from your family?" Zachary asked carefully. It was a sensitive topic they rarely discussed. Ilara's fins dipped slightly. "My mother sent a message. She wishes to meet when I next visit the homeworld." How do you feel about that? Uncertain, Alara admitted. They gave me away when they discovered I was dark, but they believed they had no choice under our laws and customs. Her light patterns showed conflicted emotions. Perhaps they too were victims of ignorance. Will you meet with her? Yes, Alara said after a moment. With my translator, I want her to see who I really am, who I always was. Zachary reached across the table and took her hand. You've come so far since that day at the bazaar. We both have, she said, squeezing his hand. You were trapped too in your own way, limited by diplomatic protocols and what others expected of you. I never thought buying a slave would lead to galactic social reform, Zachary chuckled. You didn't buy a slave, Alara corrected, her light patterns shifting to show affection. You recognized a person when others saw only property. You gave me the chance to become what I was always meant to be. Later that evening, as they prepared for an upcoming diplomatic conference where Alara would be presenting her research on cross-cultural communication methods, a message arrived from the Luminari High Council. They were offering Alara an official position as an ambassador for those with unique light frequencies. They're finally acknowledging that different isn't defective, Zachary said. All beings have value, Alara replied, her translator disc sending beautiful patterns dancing across her blue skin. Sometimes we just need help to see it. As she looked at the message, then at Zachary, Alara thought about the strange path her life had taken. From a useless slave on an auction block to a respected diplomat changing her entire society. All because one human had seen worth where others saw worthlessness. What will you tell them? Zachary asked about the council's offer. Alara's fins rose with confidence and her light patterns formed the intricate symbol for future. I'll tell them yes, she said. There is still much work to do, many lives to change. She activated her translator to its brightest setting, filling their home with complex, beautiful patterns. And I want everyone to see the light.